Hey, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Just for this first little minute here, as we are waiting for all of our attendees to join us, we just have a little quick Mentimeter question for you, just as like a fun little wait for people to fill in. So we'll get that up and started for you, just as people file in. So this is just a food for thought question. So to access this, you can go to mentimeter.com and then enter the code there that you see at the top of the screen. And then this is just a get to know you food for thought question. What to you are the biggest barriers to adopting artificial intelligence, either in your workplace or just day by day? Something to think about as people are filing in here. We'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, but this is just a fun little start-off question for you all. And again, to access this, you'll have to go to mentimeter.com, and then the code at the top there in bold. There's a little space for that you can enter, and then you'll have access to type in your answers. So we got computational skills and a lack of walkthrough examples for sure. This is a very emerging field, so that is absolutely fair. A lot of the computing powers, I'm sure we're playing catch up a lot. Environmental impacts is a big one for sure. Yeah, for anybody else who's still just filing in, we just have this opening question for you all. Just as people are joining the webinar, to access this, you can go to mentimeter.com and enter the code at the top of your screen. So, fear of new scary things, love that, fully agree. Lack of training and willingness, well, that's fantastic because this is what this webinar is all about. Development time for sure. This is all just an emerging field. So yeah, a lot of good barriers, suggestions, topics to dive into here today. So thanks for filling that out here. We can get started here. So hello everybody again, just as people are trickling in. Welcome to Dive into AI. This is session 2, Preparing for AI in Ocean Science. My name is Shen Malloy. I will be your host for today. I would also like to introduce my fellow organizers. We have Shayla Fitzsimmons, the Executive Director at CEUS Atlantic, Alexi Bakarex-Westcott, who is our Engagement Specialist, Alex Johnston, who is our AI Training Lead, and then joining us today, we also have Benjamin Veyrac from the St. Lawrence Global Observatory. So first, I would like to begin by acknowledging and respecting the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on whose traditional territories CEUS work is conducted across Canada. We strive for respectful relationships with all Indigenous peoples as we search for collective healing, true reconciliation, and honoring these beautiful lands and seas together. I am coming to you from Chibouctouc, otherwise known as Halifax, the untraditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. So before we get started, I do have a couple housekeeping items to highlight for you. We will be monitoring both the Q&A and the chat box today. You are welcome to use it both to answer or to ask questions to any of the panelists and to chat and connect with each other. This workshop will be presented in both English and French today. Zoom offers live captions and automatic translation features that you have the option of turning on and off in the little control panel at the bottom. You can also set the captions and the translation language to that of your choosing. Please note that this session will be recorded and will be shared through our social media channels and on our website to be used as a public resource. But if you have any questions about the session or are experiencing any technical difficulties, please connect with us over chat, or you can send a quick email to info@ceusatlantic.ca. So to kick off today, we have a presentation from Jennifer LaPlante about actually implementing an AI and what that means and all those considerations. She unfortunately wasn't able to join us in person, but she was kind enough to give a recorded presentation for us to share. Jennifer is the Chief Growth and Investment Officer for Canada's Ocean Supercluster, supporting innovation and growth in Canada's ocean economy. Jennifer's career has focused on data analytics and technology. As the Executive Director of DeepSense, she drove economic growth through increased comprehension and adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning in Canada's ocean sector. Jennifer holds an MBA and an MSc in computing and data analytics. She was the founding board member of AI for Manufacturing, a member of the nominating committee for the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, and a member of the Government of Canada's AI Public Awareness Working Group. To encourage more diversity in data science, she co-organizes the Halifax chapter of Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. You can ask questions in the Q&A, but as I said, since this is a virtual presentation, we will be directing questions to Jennifer, and then after this workshop series is finished, we will be releasing a What We Heard summary report where you'll be able to find what we heard from there. So now I will share her video presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ocean community. I'm really excited to be hosted by CUs to have a conversation with you about ocean AI. My name is Jennifer LaPlante. I'm the Chief Growth and Investment Officer for Canada's Ocean Supercluster, and I come to you from Halifax, also known as Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral home of the Mi'kmaq people. Canada's Ocean Supercluster is one of 5 global innovation clusters. We are focused on innovating in the ocean. We are an industry member-led organization, not for profit, and we invest non-dilutively in ocean innovation with companies driving real commercialization of ocean tech. We strongly believe that Canada is a leader in ocean innovation, and we really work with members across the country to help support and drive really cool innovations that I'm going to kind of touch on. As an organization, we're working together with industry, with governments, with other associations in academia to drive our ocean economy to around $220 billion by 2035. This represents around 5 times growth. We think this is one of the biggest growth areas that we can see from around 2020. We think that the ocean economy is going to grow quite significantly. It may outpace other sectors as well, because we think that the innovation that is happening in the ocean is really important. There's a lot of attention associated with climate and other areas, and so really happy that you're part of the community that is focused on ocean in general, but hopefully ocean innovation as well. In terms of AI, which is what we're really going to be talking about today, Canada is also a global leader in AI. We have some of the best AI researchers in the world. And so it's one of the reasons why I think ocean AI should be Canada's real drive and push on the AI opportunities. Really collaborating with our AI expertise and bringing that in with our ocean expertise is a significant opportunity for all of us. I think some of the things we should touch on first is where is their application in the ocean sector and how is it currently being used. I'm going to get into how some of the applications and AI solutions can be created and what opportunities it might mean for you or for others. But let's talk first about how it's being used. When we think of the marine and maritime sector, marine transportation is absolutely significant. It's a key driver across many of our port cities, including Halifax and Vancouver, Montreal, Quebec, Trois-Rivières. There's many cities around the country that really have significant commercial port activity. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes into this, but also there's a significant amount of data. And whether you're thinking about vessels that come in, the cargo that's on them, the multimodal transportation that happens once vessels are in port, and all of the activities that are associated with operating within a port. The amount of data is huge, and so there's a lot of companies that are working on trying to find solutions for the problems that are associated with optimizing marine transportation. We know we need to be migrating away from fossil fuels, so this presents really interesting opportunity to understand emissions, also understanding fuel usage and understanding vessel movements and trying to optimize vessels so arrivals and movement of those vessels is as most efficient as possible. So there's just vast loads of data that are currently being used to help analyze and optimize this sector. Some of the other things that's really interesting too when we think about this is the different types of data. So we talk about data fusion and how data can come together. You know, when you're dealing with a vessel, you have GIS data, so or And so we were looking at or AIS data in terms of the actual data coming off of a vessel. So when a vessel's out in the middle of the ocean, it's pinging out its specific location. And this is really interesting because you can pair that up with satellite images and other forms of data that allow us to create a really robust picture of what's happening with a vessel and where the vessel is, where it's going to go, and even maybe it transmits other data, including weather data or observations. We have lots of opportunity as well to take satellite images and identify whales and other mammals that might be in the path of a vessel. So there's all of these pieces of really interesting, cool solutions that can be created for some of the challenges we have in the sector. And now that there's vast amounts of data being collected, you have massive compute infrastructure and knowledge and expertise across various domains, we're seeing increasing amounts of investment and innovation in the marine transportation space. Another area that's really important for us to think about too are things like our Arctic. Our sea ice is melting and the Arctic ice is melting. It means our water levels are increasing. It now means, of course, too, that there's migration of species. You have different types of there's salmon that have been recorded in the Arctic. You have other forms of mammals that are moving around. But also it means from a military and defense standpoint, we probably have significant more opportunity for us to better protect the Arctic front that we currently have in Canada. And so we're seeing some really interesting use cases around how systems and tools can be used in the Arctic. So everything from drones and autonomy to data collection, eDNA in the water column, understanding really what the activity looks like up north and how you can have communication that can be transmitted and supported for any kind of vehicle or vessel that's traveling up north, and increase support to communities. So we see examples of underwater tidal turbines that are helping support remote communities that would otherwise rely on diesel, which then creates interesting data analysis and data analytics opportunities because we have new infrastructure and new systems that didn't used to exist in certain locations. So the Arctic in and of itself in Canada is creating a really, really interesting opportunity for us to explore new technology, new solutions, and new AI opportunities. For those of you who aren't as familiar with renewable energy, we have incredible ocean renewable energy opportunities at our doorstep. Not only do we have tidal energy, which is really taking advantage of consistent tides where they go in and out on a regular basis 2 times a day, very predictable energy usage. We also have wave energy, which presents really interesting opportunity for specific use cases. There's examples of having wave energy that might help provide power generation for something like a fish pen, because it's very concentrated and specific. And it might then also power up any kind of analytical tools that could be in a fish pen that are associated with understanding the fish health, fish feed, and it's really around trying to generate energy and power consumption that can support what's currently happening in other places where you may be using fuel or have other kinds of energy production that isn't as renewable and reliable. The other big piece for us, though, in Canada, too, is around offshore renewable energy for offshore wind. So we're looking at massive wind farms that could be taking place in both Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and we have some of the best winds in the world, which means we're going to be generating interesting wind that can then eventually maybe tie in with existing energy lines and going back into the grid. Maybe it turns into power sources that power production and other facilities that could be really valuable from a manufacturing standpoint that might be otherwise very energy dependent, and if it wasn't renewable energy, it didn't make sense. But once you have renewable energy, it may make sense for us to shift and create some new forms of manufacturing. And of course, there's always the opportunity for us to explore the movement into new types of fuel. So hydrogen production as a result of offshore wind, which then hydrogen or ammonia or other derivatives can be used for fuel, alternative fuel sources. And if you're using offshore wind, which is a renewable source of energy, and then you're converting it to another form of energy, it's still a renewable energy that's really valuable. And so the thing that's really interesting around anything associated with the energy side is there's massive potential for us to start thinking about the data gets collected first for maybe site selections, for monitoring of the health of the species. So whether it's monitoring fish or whales or birds that are in the area, then also once infrastructure is created, understanding from a maintenance and support standpoint, how is that infrastructure doing? What are the things that we can be doing to maintain? So there's real opportunity here from a data and analytics standpoint that can help support an entire sector associated with renewable energy. Aquaculture, fisheries, seafood, crustaceans, other forms of food are really important to us as just in general in the globe. 3 billion people get protein from the ocean and from those sources. So people have created fish farms, there's aquaculture sites for seaweed, there's increased work around understanding and optimizing fisheries and catch of things like lobster or even oysters and scallop farms. So there's really interesting data that gets associated with all of this, where if somebody has a fish farm, as an example, you really want to monitor the health of fish, you want to understand water temperature or salinity. If you're catching fish as a fisher, it's of value to know your fuel consumption and your location and other elements associated with what you're actually catching. And so there's really increasing amounts of use cases and applications where data in the ocean sector is providing a lot of value for those who currently operate their own fish farms or operate fisheries or fishers. And we're seeing this really interesting evolution as well, because as there's regulatory clarity and change and other things that might be important to people, example of decarbonization, it's creating these new opportunities for real ocean innovation. And the data aspect of it is fundamentally important in helping create awareness, helping people understand what's currently happening in the fisheries and aquaculture side, and also just creating really neat opportunities for just general innovation and making things more efficient and effective for those who work in these areas. A really important point around data that gets collected in the ocean that's valuable for us is around storms and storm prediction. We've seen some really devastating seasons in the past couple of years. Not only do we have the earliest starting and the longest going hurricane season ever right now, last year we had a hurricane that came through Mexico and went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 within 12 hours. And one of the challenges that we have with elements around trying to do storm prediction is they're relatively rare events. You need a significant amount of data to predict them. And then the robustness of the data. So when you use very consistent weather models and forecasting models, you don't always have access to real-time data. And so we're seeing interesting use cases and examples of evolution to better understand autonomous systems or remote operated surface vehicles that can then actually traverse out into really turbulent waters and weathers and collect more data that could help us make more informed estimates around storms. So if you have, a small surface vessel that is remote operated or autonomous, that can take sensors out and better understand the temperature of water within the water column, because that's where we're seeing real activity as warm waters, as water levels or water temperatures increase, it creates a really great condition for a hurricane. And so as a result, we don't always have really good data at that water level in certain locations. So we see really interesting opportunities for increased sensors in the water, increased access to data, and ideally, as we have more robust data volumes coming in, we should be able to improve our estimates around storm estimates and predictions around store behavior. And then parts of it too are around modeling around where we should be building infrastructure and where we're at risk for flooding and other elements of making more sustainable and hospitable climates. We want to think about where do we need to reinforce, where is there a chance that communities might flood. And so all of these are all interesting potential opportunities for data sharing, data collection, and then of course great forecasting and modeling that comes into play. Data is really the biggest thing that we should be talking about, because the community of CEOs focuses on collecting a lot of data, operating on fair principles, and making sure that that data is accessible, that people can find it, they can use it, they can share it. And the challenge with that, though, sometimes is private sector companies don't typically share data because it's usually commercially sensitive to them and really valuable for them. And I think one of the things that we need to continually work on is opening our eyes to where there might be collaboration potential for those who collect data, who might have the opportunity to share it with someone, whether it's commercially sensitive, so they only share it with a specific few individuals. But also the other thing we have to think about too is a lot of research happens and then data sits in someone's laptop, and we don't always get a chance to see the value of that data. Some people are a little afraid that maybe there's a couple of papers that can still come out of data, and so they're apprehensive to share it. So I think CEUS does a great job of sharing a lot of data that is collected by others, but there's still significant amounts of data that are out there that might be valuable to someone else. And as the Ocean Supercluster, this is one of the things that we're working on with a group, a data working group, on how do we provide support and incentives for others to share data. And so if there's one takeaway you have today, it's thinking about how can you share data or make data available. It doesn't mean you're not going to sell. You could sell data, you could have a commercial relationship, you could have a joint venture, or give data away as well. But the more that we have sharing of data and the usefulness of data, I think that's really going to be key for us to better, to improve and create new, interesting models and solutions that could solve problems. But let's get into things around, what are you actually going to create and what are you going to do? So we're here and we're talking about, the whole idea of people want to create artificial intelligence solutions. And so AI is everywhere. People are always talking about using, DALL-E and ChatGPT or Midjourney or one of the many other solutions, Perplexity. There's countless startups and other large companies out there doing some really interesting work. And then the question turns to, well, can I go and create some kind of a solution myself? And the short answer is, of course you can. But we're going to take a bit of a journey on this because I think there's two pieces. If you're, a student doing some research, it's very different than if you're a company going to build something. And I'm conscious that there's a hybrid there as well. Maybe you're a student doing some research and you're looking at maybe can I go and create actually a commercial solution with it versus you're already in a company. So we're going to talk about. Let's talk about your problem with your data, and I just had to restart the video because I went forward by accident on a slide. So we're going to create an algorithm that is going to start with some of the robust data that you have. So let's say you want to do a forecast prediction of weather, or I'm interested in a forecast prediction of weather, and it's because I want to know when it hits a certain temperature if I can go and deploy a sensor in the ocean, as an example. So I go and I'm working with a team or a data scientist or somebody who is going to help. And we're going to collectively go and train a model. And so what I've said is, okay, let's go train a model on predicting weather 2 days out. And that's great, off they go. But without having really aligned on what the problem is and what we're looking for, we kind of miss out on an opportunity here. Maybe what I'm really looking for is weather is a temperature up to 2 decimal places or 3 decimal places. But maybe somebody's walked away and said, okay, well, Jen just needs to know whether or not the weather is good enough to deploy a sensor or not. And so you know what? That's just a category. I'm going to determine good enough or not good enough, or weather is good, weather's bad. And those are two very different, distinct algorithms or different algorithms you'd be using in prediction outcomes. And of course, even the reliability of those two models is going to change, because if all of a sudden I'm going to 3 decimal places, the reliability is going to be a little bit is not going to be as strong, versus if you're trying to make a prediction of 2 categories, it's probably going to be a much more reliable model. And so the thing you have to really think about when people go and they're trying to train some kind of a solution or solve a problem using AI is, what is the actual problem you're solving? And then what is the actual prediction you're trying to make? Really aligning on, I am trying to predict X or I'm trying to predict Y, and then deciding how reliable is it. And so if I said, okay, well, 75% is good enough. If you can predict the weather to 1 decimal place within 75% accuracy, high level, is that good enough? Absolutely. Now, if I were to walk away and go to my doctor's office and my doctor was making an estimate around some kind of blood work that I'd had or likelihood for disease, or a bank was doing it to determine whether or not I was to receive a loan, and they had a model that was 75% accurate on my likelihood to default on a loan, as an example, maybe I wouldn't be comfortable with that. And so we can't always assume that when people are going and creating solutions, they're fully aligned on what the problem is and how to actually get there and how to measure success once you get there. So it's really up to the use case. If I were going and writing a paper, then maybe it's fine. That's 75% accurate. But if I were going and selling this commercially to companies, that might not be good enough. And data, so let's say I'm going to go and I'm going to train a model. I'm going to train a model on the temperature, and I only have 2 years worth of data. And the challenge is I have 2 years worth of data, and that's only 2 winters. And so rare events, you might have weird spikes of and drops of weather in the winter. 1 year was really hot, 1 year was really cold. It may not be enough. And so when we think about data, we have to think about the robustness of the data, of how much you have. Is there enough of those events? Because these models are not always good at predicting rare events. You need to have lots of instances of those events for them to then make a prediction on. And then the other thing to think about, let's say you're using images for some kind of prediction. Do you have consistent, robust definitions of what that data is? So for example, maybe I want to predict corrosion on an underwater pipe. Well, I should have significant number of images of different forms of corrosion, different pipes, in different water. So maybe I have a rocky bottom of the ocean, and maybe I have a salty one or sandy one, and maybe it's a bit of a blue tinge and a different tinge. And while you can do some synthetic data and adjust some of those pieces, there's a couple of other pieces you really need to think about, which is the definition of corrosion. Is my definition of corrosion the same as yours? Because if I went and labeled images as this is a corroded pipe, but you didn't think it was, or vice versa, now we get into some kind of subjectivity. And so when you're in numerical data, maybe it's not such a challenge, but when you get into other forms, like a labeled image as an example, you really have to align on what that definition of your data is, and it's really kind of key to think through how robust that data is. And then of course the other piece is, let's say you're if you're writing a paper on it, that's fine, but if you were going to maybe turn this into a business or working for a business, you still have to think about what the future state looks like. So if I'm going to go and I'm looking at corrosion in underwater pipes, and I've only ever collected images of some underwater pipes or vessels or something like that while in Atlantic Canada, and then I moved to the Pacific coast, and then I moved down to the Caribbean, all of a sudden there's going to be maybe differences in pipes design, in color, in contrast, or in vessels, maybe in vessel hull design. All of a sudden the input data is not going to be reflective of what I've trained the model on. And so we really have to think about what the longevity is of what you're creating and where it's going to go. In terms of the algorithms, I think, the most important thing to remember is it's a recipe, and you're going to have to try lots of them. And an example I often use is my celiac son. When I make him banana bread, I follow the same recipe as I would if I were making it for my other son who can eat regular wheat flour. And I followed the same recipe with the same ingredients, and the only thing I've swapped out is my flour, and the outcome's fundamentally different. And so when you think about the algorithms, you might have algorithms that work in certain instances, but you're going to have to swap out and try new things to see what works, because maybe one algorithm is really great at making the prediction of my temperature to 1 decimal place in the winter, and maybe another one is much more accurate the entire year round. And so it's really going through and thinking through what are you trying to predict and how. One of the other pieces too, I think that's really valuable, is we have this thing where sometimes people want to go and create it on their own. So they want to go and they want to build out some kind of a solution, and they think, I'm going to go train a model, and that's great, and now I've got a product or a solution that I can use. And the thing to remember is, once you've actually trained a model, that's just the start. Training a model is great, and maybe if all you want to do later on is take net new data, run that model, and make a prediction, perfect. But there's so much more to it, because if you were maybe going to use this as a commercial product, maybe you have to build a web app and then some kind of infrastructure that allows you to have constant data input that allows you to make that prediction and then push out that prediction somewhere. So we really have to think about all of the system creation that's required once you go and train this model. Maybe you're still storing it somewhere on a Git repo, but you want to allow other people to access it and use it. You have all these challenges, like thinking through well, I'll go through on the next slide, but really thinking through, do you need to be the person that goes and creates and trains this yourself? Or is there a chance someone's already gone out, done all the hard work, and you can adopt it and use whatever they've created? So for example, part of Sue's group, there was a Meridian who had trained some interesting models around whale sounds. And so it's one of these things where maybe that's might be good enough in terms of what somebody was looking to use for identifying whales, but then maybe actually you need to retrain or create a whole new model because there's some other inputs that are different than what was originally there. So I think sometimes people want to just go and create for the sake of creating, and don't always do a bit of an assessment of what's existing in the marketplace before they take that next step. Is it not letting me change slides? We're going to talk about build versus buy, and I think this is really valuable whether you're an organization or an institution who is building a solution. So a private company is going to go and they're going to build something, and that means it needs to really be specific to their needs. That means that there's nothing else out in the market that can handle their unique value proposition or the unique data they have. So, if I was going to go and build out a customer relationship management, a CRM site, and I want to make some kind of comparison with my existing customers, it might make sense for me to go and buy a solution. But maybe in this instance, I have such unique data that it's really valuable for me to go and build something. It means also that I get to retain all the intellectual property rights that I have, and I can really make this specific to me, my own processes, who works on it. I have really good control over what we create. But the biggest thing we have to remember is that means you need really good expertise. So again, going back to just creating a model and an algorithm isn't going to be the be all and end all. You have to go and actually think about how to create who's going to pay for this, somebody to go and train these models, how are you going to store it, what kind of compute power you need. It could take a bit of time for you to go and create this as well. You're going to have to do some puts and takes and try different types of algorithms and see what works. It means really that you have that in-house expertise, but then that means they need to maintain this system. So you go and I'm going to create a model that identifies whales in images, but then now that means I need to have some kind of cloud infrastructure. I need to figure out what my data ingestion is going to look like. So maybe I have a data engineer. I need to think about what my front end looks like. So is it an app that I have on a phone or on, in a web-based infrastructure? And then when the world changes and suddenly things look different, how am I going to retrain and resupport those models? And so there's a lot of work that goes into not just building, but maintaining. And often you see this sometimes with different larger organizations or institutions where going and building it the first time is not so bad. People can handle this at capital cost and up they go, but then it takes money to support and maintain that. There's an ongoing operational expense to being able to make sure that this is still up to date and it makes sense. And so it's really valuable to think through how that is operating. On the flip side, sometimes you might want to go and buy. Somebody's made something. It might be a lot easier for you to implement upfront. So somebody's gone and already created some kind of a solution. It means that maybe they're going to provide some kind of an update that you really don't need that in-house expertise. But of course, there's going to be less customization. So and maybe you have a vendor that you're relying on or a partner or somebody who's created this for you. You're going to have to wait for their updates, and so that could take a bit of time. You might not necessarily have any control over your IP. So maybe, I've got some really interesting footage of underwater fish, and I go and I upload it in someone else's application and I want them to do some kind of analysis and prediction off of it. But now they have my data. And so then that's a bit of a challenge too, because I've suddenly gone and given it to them. But maybe the pros and the cons, it maybe outweighs the cost of me having to go build it and maintain it myself. But it's that part where there might be some bias in there. So if somebody went and created a solution that had some kind of bias as a result of their training data, you're now using that solution. I use the example of something like an HR system. So maybe I went and I bought a third-party app that's going to help sort through resumes for me. Well, if there was some bias in the model they trained, I'm now going and buying a solution that now has bias in it, and now I've adopted that bias. And that's a real risk. One last piece I think that's really valuable is, when anybody's thinking through some kind of AI solution, thinking through how do you actually decide what you're going to do. If you're a student and you are looking to try to create some kind of an AI solution, there's lots of great programs and courses you can do out there that I highly recommend. But maybe if you're a company or someone else, it's really valuable for you to think through what can you do. So here's an example of a prioritization that you could have. This could be great for a company or for others. Think about the different ideas that you have, and then this is up to you to identify high, medium, low, and what that means to you and where your priorities lie. But first, start with: do you have data? Like, is it a lot of data that you have? If you're a company, these are kind of some of the things that might be important. Like, will it reduce some kind of cost for you? Will it make you more efficient? How hard is it going to be for you to go implement this? Is there any kind of risk associated with it? And so these are pieces that could be really valuable. So maybe if you're a student, you could go and rank it by there's a lot of papers already published in this area, or it's a unique value proposition. It might be easy to train. There's some existing base level models that would be really foundational for you to work with. Any of these different columns that you identify are really up to you, but it's really kind of thinking through when people say, that whole idea of, I want to go and try to find some kind of an AI solution I can work on. This might be a way to do it. Or maybe you know of so many problems that you've identified that you'd like to work on. You simply need a mechanism or a way for you to try to figure out which of the problems would be the best for you to put your time and effort towards. And it's, again, up to you to decide what goes in your columns and how important those high, medium, and lows are. But it might give you a bit of a way for you to evaluate and assess what your options are. One final thing that I think I need to push is we've done a lot of work around AI adoption in the ocean sector, small and medium-sized enterprises, even large businesses, and we know there's real barriers. A lot of it comes down to awareness and education. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. And help me understand what AI actually is. So we've created a program, OAITF, so it's Ocean AI Technology Foundations Program. I strongly recommend you check out Canada's Ocean Supercluster's website. We have a new cohort that's wrapping up, but a new one's going to be launching. Applications are launching very shortly. And so they're a small cohort where you learn with a group of individuals. Classes aren't recorded. The whole expectation is you show up for an hour and a half, 9 times, and learn about a couple of key real topics. AI is absolutely one of them. But there's other pieces around cybersecurity, around data management, and they're all really important aspects associated with anything around the technology development. So, talking about, can you train an algorithm and a model for some kind of thing? Absolutely you can. But whatever you're going to do with it is really key. And if you're going to maybe go and try to sell it or make money off of it or share it with others, there's a couple of really big key pieces that might be really helpful for you to understand some foundational pieces. So hopefully there's been some pieces that you've taken away from this conversation today, and I wish you an enjoyable rest of your session.
All right, so thank you, Jen. So like I said before, we do welcome questions from whatever Jen said in the chat, and we will do our best to answer what we can. But like I said before, we will be releasing a What We Heard Summer Report afterwards and sending all of these questions to her, so you can find what we heard there as well. So now moving on, we will next be hearing from Benjamin Vivrak. Benjamin is the programmer analyst at the St. Lawrence Global Observatory. He will be presenting on AI ethics best practices. But please note that this presentation will be in French with bilingual slides. So just a reminder, you can use Zoom's automatic translation feature, which is located down at the bottom on the control panel. So without further ado, I will now pass it off to Benjamin.
Bien, bonjour à tous. Tout d'abord, est-ce que tout le monde peut m'entendre? Everybody can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Bien, donc aujourd'hui, la présentation que je m'apprête à donner concerne l'intelligence artificielle et l'éthique. Vaste sujet s'il en est. La première chose à avoir en tête quand on aborde ce sujet, c'est que l'intelligence artificielle s'inscrit dans 2 mondes. Le monde présent, que l'on connaît, qui a des règles définies, qui a un cadre construit, qui a des principes qui sont relativement clairs, et le monde à venir, qui par définition est inconnu, en construction, et qui bouleverse certaines règles établies. Eh bien, l'intelligence artificielle se trouve à l'intersection de ces 2 mondes. Maintenant, qu'est-ce qu'on À quoi pense-t-on lorsqu'on parle d'éthique et d'intelligence artificielle? Next slide, please. En fait, il s'agit de savoir comment bien procéder pour implémenter des solutions artificielles dans une organisation. Quelle est la manière qui permet de procéder sans trop de désordre, sans trop de bouleversement, et en fait, quelle serait, si ce n'est la meilleure manière, en tout cas une manière optimale de procéder. Pour comprendre cela, il faut avoir en tête que beaucoup de sujets vont être impliqués. On va devoir avoir une réflexion sur des sujets qui traitent des data, des données, de l'environnement, des personnes, de la manière dont on s'organise. Et là, le but, l'intention de cette présentation, c'est de dresser, de répertorier en fait ces différents sujets à avoir en tête lorsqu'on pense intelligence artificielle. Next, please. Le premier point qu'il faut considérer, c'est que toute intelligence artificielle se base sur la donnée. La donnée, c'est la matière première. C'est le carburant de l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, tout biais qui va concerner vos données vont automatiquement se répercuter dans vos systèmes d'intelligence artificielle. Donc, la nécessité de faire en sorte d'avoir les données les plus qualitatives possibles va s'imposer à vous. Si vous laissez des biais dans vos données, vous allez avoir des conséquences qui vont être exacerbées par l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, la première démarche à avoir en tête, c'est de s'assurer qu'il y a un minimum de biais au niveau des datas. La deuxième démarche à mettre en œuvre, c'est de tester les résultats. On ne peut pas se contenter de regarder ce qu'il y a en entrant. Il faut être sûr que ce qu'il y a en sortant de votre système n'est pas produit ou généré de nouveaux biais. Or, vos modèles évoluent dans le temps. Donc, il va falloir tester à un instant donné et retester régulièrement. Next, please. Donc, toujours concernant les données, il y a aussi un aspect qui est crucial, qui est spécifique aux données, mais qui s'intègre à l'intelligence artificielle. C'est celui qui concerne tout ce qui est données confidentielles, critiques ou sensibles. Attention, euh, si vous fournissez à un système d'intelligence artificielle des données, vous vous exposez à ce que celles-ci fuitent. En tout cas, que vous n'ayez plus nécessairement la main sur ces données. Donc, s'il y a des données qui sont confidentielles, qui sont privées, une manière simple de procéder avant même d'utiliser une intelligence artificielle, c'est on pourrait dire, caviarder en quelque sorte ces informations. Cependant, dans certains cas, vous aurez besoin de manipuler des données critiques avec des systèmes d'intelligence artificielle. Dans ce cas, une manière de procéder, c'est d'utiliser des solutions internes. À chaque fois, vous avez deux options quand vous utilisez une intelligence artificielle. Soit vous la faites tourner sur vos propres machines, soit vous utilisez une API et donc vous passez dans ce qu'on appelle le cloud. Dès lors que vous allez utiliser une API, que vous allez transmettre vos données à un prestataire de service qui est dans le cloud, vous vous exposez à ce qu'elle fuite. Donc le meilleur moyen, quand c'est critique et que vous n'avez pas d'autre choix, c'est de privilégier un modèle qui tourne sur vos propres machines. Next, please. Maintenant, on va aborder un cas qui est plus spécifique à l'intelligence artificielle. C'est celui de la transparence et de l'explicabilité. En fait, on ne veut pas que votre utilisateur se retrouve face à une boîte noire. C'est-à-dire qu'il comprenne ce qui rentre, qu'il comprenne éventuellement ce qu'il sorte, mais qu'il n'ait aucune idée du processus à l'intérieur qui est à l'œuvre et qui génère le résultat. Pour éviter ça, la première chose à faire, tout simplement, c'est de dire à l'utilisateur qu'il est en train de recourir à une intelligence artificielle. De plus en plus, des solutions de ce type vont être implémentées dans des applications et ça ne sera pas toujours évident de déceler la présence d'une IA. Donc, le meilleur moyen, c'est de dire clairement à l'utilisateur, attention, cet outil utilise l'intelligence artificielle. Pourquoi est-ce que c'est important? La plupart des résultats d'intelligence artificielle sont dits probabilistes, alors que les algorithmes classiques, les applications classiques, sont davantage déterministes. La manière d'appréhender les résultats s'en trouve considérablement affectée. Donc il faut que l'utilisateur en soit conscient. Le deuxième point, c'est de correctement documenter vos processus pour justement sortir de cette boîte noire. Il va falloir préciser quel est le modèle qui est à l'œuvre. Il va falloir expliquer ses limites, expliquer ses avantages, ses inconvénients, justement pour démystifier un peu les processus qui s'accomplissent. Il y a un autre point aussi qui est important, c'est celui de la traçabilité. Étant donné que la plupart des modèles évoluent, la qualité et la nature des résultats qu'ils produisent est amenée à changer. Si vous voulez comprendre comment on est arrivé à un résultat donné, il faut comprendre l'état de votre système au moment de la génération de ce résultat. Une manière relativement simple de procéder, c'est de fournir en plus des résultats finaux, des métadonnées qui vont contextualiser la manière dont le résultat a été généré. Et par exemple, inscrire dans ces métadonnées la version précise du modèle qui a été utilisé pour générer le résultat. Next, please. Autonomie et contrôle humain. Oui, alors là aussi, c'est un point assez crucial. Vous pourrez avoir la tentation de tout automatiser. C'est-à-dire que chacun de vos processus dans vos organisations recourt à des systèmes d'intelligence artificielle qui permettent de se substituer à l'intervention humaine. Attention, il ne faut pas succomber à la facilité. Faites en sorte de toujours laisser la possibilité à l'utilisateur d'avoir le contrôle à chaque étape du processus. Il faut que celui qui est le dernier mot soit l'humain et pas la machine. Pour ce faire, il va falloir que vous donniez la possibilité à l'utilisateur de pouvoir interagir lors des différentes étapes du processus. Ça peut paraître un peu flou, mais un exemple tout simple. Je suppose que beaucoup d'entre vous utilisent ChatGPT. L'un des derniers modèles de cet outil est ce qu'on appelle un modèle Canva. La caractéristique principale de ce modèle, c'est que une fois qu'une réponse est générée, l'utilisateur va pouvoir éditer cette réponse, la modifier, la raffiner, éventuellement supprimer certaines sections, et dans tous les cas, va pouvoir redéfinir, en tout cas retravailler la version finale de la réponse. Eh bien, c'est un petit peu ce niveau de mainmise, de maîtrise que l'on souhaite avoir pour garantir que c'est bien l'utilisateur qui fixe les règles et non pas le système. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. Impact environnemental. Alors là, comme expliqué en introduction, on est dans le présent, mais on est aussi, évidemment, on voit bien que les enjeux ne vont cesser de croître à l'avenir. L'intelligence artificielle a les mêmes problèmes, en tout cas implique les mêmes problèmes que le numérique et a tendance à les exacerber. Tout ce qui a trait à l'environnement va avoir énormément d'impact, va être très impacté par les nouveaux systèmes d'intelligence artificielle. Il faut garder en tête que, quels que soient les modèles, quelles que soient les solutions que vous retenez, dans tous les cas, ce seront toujours des ordinateurs qui vont tourner et qui vont les faire fonctionner. que ce soit vos propres machines, que ce soit dans le cloud, vous allez utiliser des serveurs. Or, ces serveurs ont une empreinte énergétique plus ou moins importante. Et selon que les solutions d'IA retenues par vos organisations sont plus ou moins complexes, plus ou moins sophistiquées, eh bien, il va avoir une empreinte carbone qui sera plus ou moins significative. Il faut garder à l'esprit que d'un modèle par rapport à un autre, on peut avoir, par exemple, un facteur 1000 en termes de complexité si on prend, par exemple, en compte les paramètres. Euh, Typiquement, à qualité de résultat égale, si vous avez le choix entre plusieurs modèles, ayez le réflexe de privilégier le plus simple. Ce sera souvent le moins coûteux énergétiquement. Vous avez de plus en plus d'outils qui sont mis à disposition pour justement tracer cette consommation énergétique. J'en ai mentionné un qui est Code Carbone, qui est un outil, me semble-t-il, qui est développé par des équipes du MIT, qui permet simplement, au niveau de vos applications, de mettre certains outils en place pour mesurer justement cette consommation. Un point qui est simple à formuler, mais plus compliqué à mettre en place, c'est celui de la localisation de vos serveurs. Quand bien même vous utilisez un serveur qui est externalisé, c'est-à-dire qui est dans le cloud, il n'en demeure pas moins que physiquement, il est quelque part dans le monde, dans un data center. Selon que ce data center soit au Québec, en Alberta, aux États-Unis, en Chine, l'empreinte carbone qu'il aura sera très différente. Donc peut-être que avoir une réflexion dans votre organisation de quels sont les meilleurs prestataires de services du point de vue de leur localisation, ben, ça peut aussi être une réflexion pour réduire les coûts énergétiques. Next, please. Conformité légale et réglementaire. Donc, j'ai mis cet aspect plutôt vers la fin pour une raison simple, c'est que trop souvent, quand on parle d'éthique, les gens ont tendance à résumer ce sujet au simple cadre légal. Alors, évidemment, le respect de la loi euh, doit se faire. Mais comme on vient de le voir, les différents champs concernés par l'éthique et l'intelligence artificielle sont beaucoup plus larges. Néanmoins, vous n'aurez d'autre choix que de vous conformer au cadre législatif et réglementaire. Vous allez vous apercevoir qu'il y a beaucoup de strates qui vont devoir être prises en compte, que ce soit provincial, fédéral, international ou sectoriel. Étant donné que c'est un sujet qui est dynamique, qui est en construction, il va falloir mettre en place vraisemblablement une veille pour se tenir au courant en permanence des évolutions. Sinon, vous risquez d'être dépassé et à terme submergé. Donc l'une des premières choses et prérequis, c'est justement mettre une place en veille pour garder une conscience de la situation. Et une deuxième chose, c'est que vous n'aurez d'autre solution que de recourir à un professionnel, à un expert pour traiter ces sujets. Là, il n'y a que deux choix possibles. Soit vous avez les ressources en interne, soit vous devrez faire appel à des prestataires extérieurs, ou en tout cas à des cabinets de juristes spécialisés extérieurs. Mais sachez que plus vos solutions auront vocation à être diffusées, à être ouvertes vers l'extérieur, plus vous aurez nécessité de garantir le fait qu'elles respectent correctement le cadre légal auprès d'un professionnel. Next, please. Alors, on en arrive au dernier point, c'est concrètement, dans vos organisations, comment est-ce qu'on peut procéder pour gérer ces différents aspects? On l'a vu, il y a une multitude de points à considérer et l'une des erreurs qui est malheureusement bien trop souvent commise, c'est de laisser la responsabilité de tout ce sujet aux simples développeurs. Évidemment, ceux qui développent les solutions dans vos organisations ont une responsabilité. Mais cette responsabilité va largement au-delà des simples programmeurs et analystes. L'une des manières de procéder, c'est de mettre en place un comité. Un comité qui va regrouper les différentes strates de votre organisation. Les scientifiques de données, les développeurs, les directeurs, les responsables en communication ou si vous avez des professionnels dans le droit, les impliquer aussi. Il faut que l'ensemble des composants de votre organisation soient représentés au sein de ce comité, car toute votre organisation est concernée. La charge de ce comité sera de se répartir justement la réflexion à avoir sur les différents points évoqués. Et il devra aussi communiquer, c'est-à-dire diffuser la compréhension qu'il aura acquise auprès des équipes. Il faut que chaque membre de votre organisation soit au moins conscient de ce sujet-là. Il y a une autre conséquence à ça, c'est qu'étant donné que ça évolue perpétuellement, vous n'aurez probablement d'autre choix que de vous former en continu. La formation sur ces différents sujets devient une nécessité. Alors évidemment, on ne s'attend pas à ce que ce soit une personne qui centralise toute la connaissance sur le sujet, c'est illusoire, mais justement une répartition, par exemple, auprès du comité, pour que chaque membre puisse avoir une compréhension assez précise des différents aspects. Si vous procédez de la sorte, il y a toutes les chances que les initiatives que vous allez prendre par rapport à l'implémentation d'intelligence artificielle dans vos organisations se passent au mieux. Donc, il y aurait beaucoup d'autres sujets à aborder, mais c'est une synthèse des différents aspects à prendre en compte lorsqu'on aborde l'intelligence artificielle et qu'on veut procéder de manière éthique. Je vois qu'il y a quelques questions. Je ne sais pas si je vais avoir le temps d'y répondre. Euh, hop, excusez-moi. Ok, test, Benjamin. Unfortunately. Quelles seraient les questions? Là, je suis à la recherche des questions. Je n'en vois pas apparaître dans... Enfin, pour ma part, la présentation se termine. Si vous avez des questions, je suis prêt à les accueillir. Hop, excellent. Chen?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Didn't realize you were finished. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for your insights, Benjamin. And yeah, thank you to all of our participants as well for bearing with us if you're using the captions. I understand they're a little bit finicky. Classic, they were working when we were doing the test, but of course, when we were doing the actual thing, typical. So if you do have any questions for Benjamin, you can direct them into the Q&A or to the chat. But if not, we will be taking a quick 5-minute break. So please be back before the hour. So either at 3 or 2 or 11, whichever one is applicable to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you everyone. Welcome back. So next up, we will be hearing from Alex, who is our Building Bridges AI training lead, and he will be taking us through his work in creating an AI training course. So off to you, Alex.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us on the translated captions. This kind of demonstrates some of the tricky parts of working with AI. To start off, we're going to go to the beach. We're going to get this Mentimeter slide ready to go. Shayla, you've got that going in? There we go. Perfect. So you can join using the link from the top, and adding in the code will take you there. This is a map of where we all are with AI. So if you're towards the top, you're kind of more on the sand. If you are kind of more involved with AI, you have a little bit more experience, you know your way around some of the concepts and the terminology a lot more. You're a little bit more in the water. Some of us can see it from the shore, some of us have our toes in the sand, some of us are getting our feet wet, and some we can see we're doing laps of front crawl. So today, where do you feel like you're standing after at least hearing from Jennifer and Benjamin, maybe having joined us too? You can just click anywhere on the map where you feel represents where you are with AI right now. Extremely technical process, but best guess will do. We got a good range of people. Seeing lots of people, yep, inching ever close to the water. I think we're all getting there. So I would say that I'm probably right where the water is starting to touch as well, a little closer since I started working here. Yeah, exactly. You got it, Andrew. We can probably switch back to the slideshow for now. So with what we're working on today, or with these series of workshops and everything that this project is working towards, we're trying to get everyone at least a little bit getting their feet wet, a little bit in the water, a little bit closer from just standing back on the shore and watching the waves. You can switch the slide over to the next one. So yeah, as I said, I'm probably right where the waves are starting as well. I've got a background in data science, ecology, sustainability, but the AI is new to me. It's new to a lot of us. And if you didn't go to school specifically to study it or graduate in roughly the last 2 years, it's probably kind of just showed up in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, AI is just more of some concepts you probably already know, just at a really impressive scale that we can reach with enough data and processing power and language. The lines are a bit blurred because we don't talk about AI and all of its related terms and concepts with consistent meanings, and it doesn't help with how much it can get sensationalized in news and everything we hear on social media. You've heard a few people give different definitions of it probably, and broadly it's about autonomy and learning in programs and machines. It's an umbrella term, but it can be hard to tell when exactly we're actually in it. AI coming onto the scene is looking a lot like when people started getting to know how to use computers or the internet, or different kinds of software that are now staples in all kinds of jobs, even the very traditionally analog ones. We've learned all about this stuff at different points in our lives, but we've had to learn how to be digitally literate in a bunch of different ways. So getting to know AI is another kind of digital literacy. And just like the kinds we're already familiar with, AI literacy, it's most likely going to be more and more vital as applications of AI show up in your world more often, whether we ask for it or not. The genie's out of the bottle, and that's neither an inherently good nor bad thing. It's just another layer of emerging complexity that's been happening alongside a lot of other really crazy stuff lately. With how quickly AI seems to have popped up everywhere in the middle of everything else, no wonder so many of us might feel like we're playing catch up and struggling to wrap our heads around it all. So at CEUS, we've been trying to sit down and have conversations about AI adoption with people from all across the ocean sector. I see some names in the audience that we recognize, so hi. Thanks for joining us today. While we heard from lots of really intelligent people who are swimming in this stuff every day, one of the most common things the rest of you also really intelligent people talked about was uncertainty. Not knowing where AI might be handy, if at all. Not knowing if it'll be helpful, if it's worth the time, the costs, not knowing if your results are reliable or where they came from, not knowing if a given use is safe or fair or responsible or reliable, not knowing where to start. So it starts with some really basic AI literacy and demystifying its component pieces. We're all coming at these ideas with different backgrounds and expertise, all of which are going to intersect with different kinds of AI in different ways and to varying extents. Because AI is less like its own food group than it's like salt. It's an element you add to your meal. But it helps when we have a common language and common conceptual frameworks to start from and work with those to get to the more exciting stuff, whatever that looks like for you. If we're all standing with our feet at least a little bit in the water, we can know what someone means when they say that something's wet. Next slide, please. So it's helpful to think about AI literacy with the lens of Bloom's taxonomy, which is just a model for the different stages of depth and how we learn new skills and ideas. Generally, some of us want to learn about AI. Some of us want to learn how to use AI, and some of us want to learn how to make AI. We need different kinds of learning and different ways to engage with AI and all its related ideas and applications and implications at each level. No matter how you're engaging with it, ethics is going to be a huge part of thinking about it and interacting with it. So really appreciate Benjamin's work that he's shared with us a little bit earlier. And so we're hoping to get the officially translated captions out when we release the recording and some of the presentations from today. We can go to the next slide. So with this first workshop series and our early training materials, we're starting very basic. We're trying to keep it accessible, even if you don't have a technical background, to try and establish a strong foundational AI literacy or bolster an existing one and connect you to whatever's your next step. Working together with you, we're creating an AI learning ecosystem with interacting digital and human components that's alive and evolving. Our first course modules will go live around the end of the year, and we have more courses and workshops planned for 2025. But it's what we hear from you in smaller conversations or bigger ones like today about the things you're curious about, where the interests or the uncertainties are for you. That'll help us narrow it down what to focus on in the future. In addition to the courses and the workshops, we're thinking about what else we can offer in the way of smaller or more targeted learning opportunities, like one-shot workshops or tutorials, or to host regular seminars with subject matter experts, leading conversations about wide ranges of new and developing topics in the ocean AI landscape. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Someone asked last week whether there was a list we could give of different tools and resources, and Jen LaPlante talked a little bit about working around that and not having to start from scratch on everything, because there's a lot that's already been done. There's a lot of really cool, really exciting things happening every day that we're still trying to keep up with. Some of these resources are paid, some of them are open. They've got different uses for different facets of AI, and we're trying to learn from the best of them and talking to different subject matter experts so that we can apply them for an oceans context and make them accessible for you. And also a big piece is curating a collection of tools and learning resources for all your ranges of needs, use cases, and expertise. So one outcome that's really big for the Building Bridges project as a whole is cultivating a community of practice for AI within the ocean sector, which is what you're doing here today. We're building that community. And at a very basic level, that just means that we keep talking to each other about this stuff and how we're encountering it in our own lives, sharing our experiences and our challenges, and learning from people who have tried to tackle the same or similar problems. One idea we'd love to try and put into action on that front, putting together some weekly or bi-weekly study halls of a sort, where for an hour every week or so, we have a space to get together, share what we're working on in the ocean AI world, or ask for help or advice on different pieces of that, or connect with other experts through our collective network. We heard from John Pye, the data operations director at Ocean Tracking Network, about a similar community that they got going around ocean data science. And that's led to some really cool outcomes for them. We're very excited about what something like that could look like for an ocean AI context. So we want to hear from you. We're continuing to sit down one-on-one with individuals and organizations for more in-depth conversations about your experiences, hopes, and concerns around AI. And we learn lots when you share your responses through something like the pre-workshop survey that we sent out, or for the different Mentimeter polls that we've been using. We've been trying to be mindful of engagement exhaustion because we've all got a lot fighting for our attention right now. Next slide. But the good news is, as impressive as an AI program can be, it's still not as intelligent as you and your human brain. The computer scientist, Francois Cholet, makes a distinction between skill, or how well you perform a task, and intelligence, which is how efficiently you gain new skills. Most of us can learn a new skill with enough practice, but the faster a person can pick up the skill, the more intelligent we might think they are, yeah? AI tools are very skillful. They can become very good at doing specific tasks, but to get to that point, they need to spend many, many more hours learning than it'd be possible for you or I to do. Researchers can teach rats to drive tiny cars in about 24 5-minute trials. Not very well, maybe, not following all the rules of the road, but they can learn to do the basic task. It takes magnitudes more time to teach a machine to perform at the same level. AI might outskill us pretty spectacularly on certain tasks, but we're still better at applying past experiences to new contexts, or in other words, learning. You are more intelligent than an AI, and just like everything else new that's emerged during your lifetime, you can learn how to navigate a world with AI in it. So now I'm going to move on to a Zoom whiteboard that I've made with a couple of different interactive activities. Just bear with me while we get that going here. I'm going to share the link with you so that you can get to it. There you go. So I've just posted it in the chat. I'm not going to try and open it through the Zoom because then I don't think any of us will actually be able to work with it. But I am going to see if I can share the screen. There, can we see that okay? There we go. So pop in chat if you have problems accessing this. I believe you do need to have the Zoom app installed for it to show up. But we have a couple of different activities up there for you. We've made it a bit of a choose your own adventure just because we have a bunch of different people with different backgrounds, different contexts, different levels of experience with all of these different pieces. So we've got a couple of different activities with different levels of interactivity, different levels of expertise, different topics. So play around with what you find in there. There's a couple of different external resources. We've got some different whiteboard pieces where you can take sticky notes and add in your comments to different questions or different ideation activities, and just play around with it, have some fun, see if you can get some conversations going with some of the other
We're not
attendees.
actually seeing you share the board.
Oh no?
Nope.
It says, what do you see from my screen?
Slack and
Black.
and maybe your Zoom screen, like what you see on Zoom.
Sorry about that.
But if you follow anyone who is joined us on the webinar, you can follow the link in the chat. And
Is that
and that's what Alex is trying to share. No, we're not seeing like a browser
Sorry
window.
about that. Are we able to access it through the link that I shared in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, it's working in the browser. I do see
Yeah, we wanted everyone to
people flying
go to the
around.
browser to use the whiteboard.
Too many people are accessing it. Okay. Yeah, we do have, it says it's meant to be able to take up to 100 people, but it may be that with this many people trying to do different things with it, that we can't change things. It looks like some of the links from the board aren't working, so I have some that I can share in the chat. So there's the links to the different external pieces that are part of some of the different activities in there. But see, we can add some things. And the platform for the whiteboard does take a little bit of getting used to, just because it's a bigger one as well. Let's see if I can share that. No, sorry, Shen. I don't think it's going to let me share that particular window. Oh, that's working. Okay. So Shayla's got control of it. All right. Sorry about that. But you should be able to see it okay from your browser. We've got a couple of people playing with different pieces of it. So yeah, everything is locked except for the sticky notes and the arrows for one of them. So those ones you can move around and you should be, yeah, exactly. We got some dragging and dropping that you can move over to the different pieces. Yeah, you can press H to move to drag and drop, and V back to select. Got a couple of people going over to the future vision board. Someone's working on the stinky fish. So we've got most people looking at the stinky fish, I think. So that one's around anxieties. There's a lot of pieces of that we don't really acknowledge, especially more on the technical side. But it's a really important way to reflect on how we think about AI and the pieces that we don't acknowledge, because there's a lot of other parts that don't really get covered outside of kind of some of the purely ethical pieces, or in some of the contexts in which we find ourselves engaging in AI in our jobs, in our work. But still pieces that we are concerned about and things that make us feel kind of strange about working with it. So it's very natural to feel kind of conflicted or have some anxieties or concerns about how AI is working and how it's working for you, or if it is. So glad to see some people starting to add in some pieces in there. We have one right next to it that is a bit of an analysis of the different forces that are working for or against you actually starting to work with AI or engage with it. So be adding in an arrow and changing the size of it to represent different forces that are kind of like wind in your sail or wind blowing against you for how you may be engaging with AI now or in the future. Things that are pushing you towards it, things that are pushing you away from it. And I'm sure that there are some pieces that are going to be familiar or common among many of you. We have a couple of other resources to the side where we're looking at a little bit more of the machine learning component and a little bit more of a hands-on piece. So it's just down and to the right, Shayla, if you want to scroll down to them. So these are a couple of different tools that have been designed particularly around teaching machine learning. those are external resources. They take a little bit of time to do that you can do on your own, but they're an interesting way to get some very basic concepts of machine learning and AI down, so that they're a little bit more familiar, because for some of this stuff, we have to start really simple, so that we can build up the complexity and start figuring out how all of these different pieces fit together, and what are the simple pieces that get carried forward when we make assumptions about how all of this works. But it's all part of establishing that conceptual framework so that we're on the same page together. And Teachable Machine is a tool that you can actually use to train a very basic AI model. It's open source from Google. That's a little bit more sophisticated than some of the other ones, but all of them are worth checking out, especially if you're just kind of starting out with some of this stuff. Shayla's taking a look down at the impact mapping piece. So down here, we're looking at brainstorming different pieces of how AI is affecting us now, in the future, further out. We have some sense of how that looks, but it gets a little murkier the further and further you go out into the future. Whether that's positive impacts, negative impacts, or a mix of both. There's a lot of trade-offs involved. Down to the right of the impact mapping exercise, we have a piece to get a little bit more of a sense from you about oh, we got, oh, sorry. Running a little bit out of time. So apologies for the technical issues. I'm going to leave this open. You can still play around with this even after the workshop has closed. But for now, I'm going to bring you back to Shen, so that she can wrap it up. But feel free to play around with this. I'll keep it open and unlocked for a while longer, so that if you wanted to explore some more of it, it's there for you.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, thanks everyone for bearing with these interactive technical pieces. This always happens, right? But yeah, if you do have any questions for anybody that you've heard speak today, for Jen, for Benjamin, for Alex, you can direct those to the chat or to the Q&A. But thank you for everyone for attending this second session of Dive into AI, Preparing for AI in Ocean Science. If you are interested in continuing your journey into AI, please consider registering for our final session, which will be all about AI case studies, which is going to be next Thursday, November 21st at the same time. And you can also find the recording of this and our previous sessions on YouTube. We'll also be sending around the What We Heard report and any associated resource links that went along with these webinars. And if you'd like to stay connected with us, you can find us on social media or email us at info@ceuseatlantic.ca. And thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure.